I've been wanting to make this video for a while now, in one form or another, and after pretty recently making a similar video for Blueprints, I figured it was finally time to get to it. When you think of unsolved secrets in Noita, the first one that should immediately jump to mind is the eyes. So I'm not going to waste your time, we're going to start right there. What are the eyes, and what are the eyes not? These are the eyes. There are 9 different sets of them, 5 in the first East Parallel world and 4 in the West. They spawn in specific locations depending on the world seed, but only if no mods are being used. Mods completely disable them from spawning, similar to another secret we're going to talk about shortly, and they remain entirely unsolved to this day. But that's not to say we don't know anything. We actually know quite a bit about them. We know where they can and can't spawn, how they spawn, that these images aren't present at all in the game's data, but that the engine itself generates them. We know the function that draws them on the screen. We know that there's nothing at all in the game's code that suggests they do anything, or that we have to activate them in some way, or that anything happens when they're solved. There's no evidence that points to them being some kind of Konami code or some kind of map. To the contrary, it's been confirmed by a developer when I asked them a while ago that
for the eye decorations, I think I do dare say that I have confirmation that the eye decorations do contain a message. They are not just a bug or just a meaningless thing. They actually do have a meaning. So in case that helps anyone in the community.
They are an encrypted message. You might ask yourself, why doesn't the community just data mine the solution? The reason for that is very simple. There is no solution in the data to mine. This message, whether it was originally in English or Finnish or whatever language, was encoded into eyes before being added to the game. All the game does is draw these on the screen after you pass the mod check. That's it. They're an entirely data mine-proof cryptograph. So the way to tackle this is obviously through cryptography. Based on how each of the messages begins and ends, they were grouped into alternating up and down trigrams, or sets of 3. They very easily fit into this pattern. Each of these represents a base 5 number 000 to 444, which is then converted to base 10, which produces a range of 0 to 124. Out of 36 different standard orders to read them in, only this one gives an unbroken range of base 10 numbers 0 to 82. What? Basically what this means is, we know that this is the right way to read them because the chances of this happening randomly are so low that your cat has a higher chance of typing the entire Dungeon Crawler Carl series word for word on its first try. It also gives us these pretty patterns and shared sections. Okay, so we know how to read Chinese. What else? In every one of the 9 messages, the first trigram is different, and the second and third are the same. Does that mean that this could be a numbered list or a set of numbered instructions, i.e. 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, etc.? We're not sure yet, but potentially. Although across all these messages, no trigram is present twice in a row. So if each trigram did represent a single character, then the messages would maybe have to be written in a language other than English, or especially Finnish, where consecutive letters are much less common, something like Vietnamese or Spanish. We might actually know what kind of cipher is being used, though. In the words of community member Lim, one of the most active astronauts, if there was a cipher where we had a deck of 83 cards, and for each letter of the message, we shuffle those cards in a completely different way, draw the top card, and then use the value on that card as the ciphertext output for that letter, then this method is able to reproduce all of the cryptographic properties the community has observed. Not a single other method has been found so far that can reproduce all of these. That's pretty exciting, and it would make total sense in this game because wand building is pretty much deck building. Internally, the game even refers to its spells as cards. One of the main cryptographic properties, and the reason why the community settled on this deck cipher idea, has to do with those pretty patterns I mentioned a little while ago. These actually indicate patterns in the gaps between identical letters in each message. In cryptography, these are called isomorphs, and they are a clear indicator that the same or similar words or phrases are being used in different places throughout the entire message. They also only form in certain encoding methods, and it just so happens that the deck cipher Lim described is one of the most general possible methods that can produce these. Isomorphs are also a big vulnerability in ciphers, so their presence here is a good thing and may eventually lead us to their solution, which may end up looking something like this. Just kidding. That has way too many repeated letters. It still might be a numbered list, though. However, despite all of this and the years of work people have put in, we still don't have enough information to solve them, and unfortunately, the current consensus is that we might actually need the devs to throw us a bone. But then again, there is another opinion out there that this is an intentionally unsolvable puzzle that the devs added to, in the words of Tanda Ross of Blueprints, keep us from turning over every stone, ensuring at least one mystery remains in the game. Do I believe this? No. I don't believe the devs would be so cruel. They're all super cool guys. I don't think any of them would intentionally put a puzzle in the game that can't be solved. But that also doesn't mean that it was intentionally done. There is a possibility that it's just accidentally too difficult, and without any further hints, no one is going to be able to solve it. So I am going to reach out again to the devs to see if anything more can be said about it at this time. What do I hope the eyes end up being? Honestly, I'd be okay with almost anything, except for a Rickroll. If they ended up being a recipe for how to cook something special to one of the developers, that'd be cool. I love cooking, and that's some good IRL lore. If they ended up being instructions for how to do something in the game so specific it's never been discovered, cool. With how complex all of the systems in Noita are, and I've been working on a video deep diving a few of these, there definitely could be some weird things hidden that we just haven't realized yet, or that the majority haven't realized. Because we could end up solving them, and the more knowledgeable in the community may already know the information that they tell us. It's a possibility that we have to consider. Some of us have been living in the deep end of Noita for a long time. But really, I don't personally think that it's going to end up being something we already know. I'm just considering that possibility. Or if they ended up leading us out of the game into an ARG that culminated in the discovery of the password to access the super secret private updated branch of the game, because according to SteamDB, there is a private branch, a completely invisible password protected version of the game that may or may not be different than the version of the game accessible to the public. Now, back when 1.0 was first launching, a few of us had early access to stream a private branch that did contain differences never available in any other branch. So now there's like the Hall of Wealth is like this new area made out of diamond brickwork. We always chalked that up to the devs trolling us for being content creators and getting us to spend all of our time trying to solve a non-existent puzzle during our pre-release streams. But who's to say this branch of the game never received more updates over the years, waiting for the community to solve Noita's biggest mystery in order to gain access to it? Again, something to consider. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the eyes for now. We know a lot about them. They are a message. The most significant recent discovery is that they might be a deck cipher, but they are still unsolved. If you'd like a simple way to find them in your world, Lim made Lim's telescope to help you do that, among other very useful things, such as being able to look at every single wand in your world. I just wanted to give that a quick shout out, but for now, let's move on to the next mystery.
On a scale to 1 to 10, how easy would you say the iMessages are to solve? Probably like square root of -1. I don't know at all. Probably very difficult because the community hasn't managed to solve them even now.
Just as the eyes are generated entirely by the engine if no mods are active, so too is this entire structure, the Cauldron room. If you don't realize what that means, these graphics don't appear in the game's data along with all the other graphics at all. This entire room and everything in it is generated on the fly by the engine itself. Inside this cavern is one of the most intricate and interesting looking structures in the entire game. What looks like twisting fingers of stone holding in their palm an altar on which rests the cauldron. On some days throughout the year, this cauldron is destroyed because rather than being empty, it spawns with void liquid inside, and void liquid is the densest material in the game. It will literally push pixels of even the densest rock out of its way before dissipating, effectively destroying just about anything it touches. There is an internal schedule that determines whether the cauldron is filled with void liquid or remains empty on any given day of the year. A lot of people think that this one was solved though, because part of the information we get from this place was used in solving another secret, the cessation cipher. For a full breakdown of that, I have a video talking about it here, but basically in the game's latest content update, we found that some of the new graphical assets contained a barely visible series of symbols. This, of course, ended up being a cipher. It was discovered that the key for the cipher was actually the first 30 days of the cauldron's contents, with 0 representing void liquid and 1 representing air. In addition to this, when the cauldron was first discovered in March 2021, it was found filled with acceleratium, not air or void liquid. Later, when the code for it was decompiled, this was found. It seems as if their original idea was to have it filled with a material representing a certain letter of the alphabet every day, eventually spelling out a hidden phrase. But because the game didn't have materials beginning with every letter, this idea was seemingly scrapped and then replaced with the current void liquid calendar. So because of all this, and the fact that no other use for the cauldron has ever been found, this mystery was deemed demystified. I mean, the cessation cipher does use information gained from this room, true, but only the first 30 days of the year. What about the remaining 335 days? That point alone, of course, doesn't mean that this is an unsolved mystery. Sure, development of Noita was interrupted for a while due to personal reasons, so the cauldron may actually have sat unfinished for a long time, as many people suspect, before the developers decided to give it a purpose with the cessation cipher. Also, setting aside the very obvious blank tablet right here that looks perfect for something to somehow appear on, which the devs, by the way, could very easily have removed if it did have no use since they removed other unfinished content from the game over the years. But setting that aside, let's just assume that this is it. It is solved. Fine. I've spent thousands of hours of my own time filling it with literally everything in the game, trying all kinds of alchemy and other experiments, and so have many others like Suffer. None of us have ever found anything that has any effect. In fact, data miners haven't even found any triggers here. So, from almost any perspective, despite how much we might want this structure to have some grander function, it really does appear as if the cessation cipher's message is its true purpose. However, I believe that message is greatly misunderstood.
But they were all of them deceived.
Seeking truth, the wise find instead its profound absence. That is what the cessation cipher says. The absence of truth. Unfortunately, a lot of people just took that as meaning there is no secret, so you can stop looking now, touch grass. When in fact, the concept of truth and the absence of truth has very strong implications in hermeticism, which is exactly what this game is based on, along of course with Finnish mythology. There are, after all, excerpts from actual historic hermetic texts scattered around the entire world. Alchemy might come second in gameplay for most people beneath magic, but it plays a major role in the lore. So, if solving an extremely cryptic secret questline leads us to a phrase like this, we must remember the lore and read it under the lens of hermeticism, because the game is trying to tell us something very important. In hermeticism, truth is the divine. The main goal of alchemy was not turning base metals to gold, that was just a metaphor. It was reaching spiritual enlightenment and transcending the illusions and limitations of the physical world, elevating your soul from base to gold. A profound absence is a void, and a profound absence of truth means ignorance, in which we are blinded by the material world. Seeking the divine, the wise find instead their own ignorance. The developers aren't telling us to touch grass, they're telling us the opposite. They're telling us we're focused on the wrong thing. This isn't actually a cauldron. It's a stone crucible, a vessel for performing alchemy. It's either empty and inviting, or filled with a void that destroys. Here's the fun part. I used to, until very recently, believe that we had to fill this with something. I mean, it's a video game with a really cool secret room that has an empty container in it and an obvious blank wall behind that. It looks like we're supposed to figure out what to fill it with to make something appear on that wall. But now I don't think I believe that anymore. I believe this entire structure is actually a metaphor, a visual symbol, especially after that last update. Whether or not this is all connected to the eyes remains to be seen. The eye messages might be written in the divine language of the gods, so attaining some form of gnosis, as it applies to the rules and systems of the game, shedding our ignorance and achieving spiritual enlightenment, could potentially help us to understand them more. I believe the message contained in the cessation cipher was meant to get us to think in this way. So applying this to the Cauldron room, absolute truth cannot appear in material things. What we have here is a crucible beneath a blank slate. A crucible is not only a vessel for performing alchemy, but it could also be a challenging, transformative experience or a period of great hardship, which, in this case, comes after a fresh start. The crucible and the blank slate together like this is a very strong image. I just can't believe I couldn't see it before now. So with this hidden structure, is the game telling us to start over from scratch with an entirely fresh save and perform some kind of transformative challenge? It actually could be. You know, we've heard something like this before. Was there any kind of truth in that debacle? I don't know, but after all this and studying hermeticism, I think there are some things I would like to try. And so that's the two big ones out of the way. Next we have what I'm going to call the background memorials. These are two different images that appear in fairly close proximity to one another. The first one can be found here inside the giant tree to the left of Spawn. The letters ESA can be found etched into the wood just above the roof of the Kantele room. This one isn't really a mystery. One of the developers, RV Takari or Hempeli, made a game called Environmental Station Alpha, also absolutely filled with secrets. We can only assume that he christened the tree with these letters as a form of memorial to his previous game, his way of signing this world, some game dev graffiti. My love for ESA is actually how I first discovered Noita. If you've already heard the story, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna tell it again. I started making videos over a decade ago, mostly building worlds containing secrets in Terraria. Eventually, I did a Let's Play of a Terraria adventure map named Red Hat Castle. It's this enormous Metroidvania map with a deep post-game filled with secrets. Sound familiar? I loved it. After I finished it, I asked the mapper, Feisty Gandhi, how they came up with some of their ideas. Gandhi replied, "I was really inspired by a developer named Hempeli and his game Environmental Station Alpha." And the rest is history. I played ESA, loved every single minute of it, even the Deadly Dash Maze, and then decided to look online to see what else the dev was working on. That's when I discovered some pre-release Noita devlogs. This was probably in 2018, around a year before the early access release. So you can thank Feisty Gandhi and ESA for all of the Noita videos I've ever made, and probably a lot of the other content I've made as well. Go play it if you haven't already played it. The second and final of these memorials can be found just above the dark cave to the left of the mines, right on the border between it and the ancient laboratory. This one has actually a sad story. For a long time, many of us in the community wondered about what this wacky face represented. It's been in the game since the very beginning. Then, around a year ago, this mystery was solved, though not many people know about it. Alex on the Noita Discord discovered its meaning using Google Lens of all things. This symbol was associated with a band local to one of the developers whose frontman tragically passed away. We don't know whether or not they were friends, but it's a very strong possibility. So out of respect for everyone involved, I'm being intentionally vague here. But that developer added this image to their game in tribute to this band and this person. A true memorial to Koika and Karyaporti, forever enshrined in the game Noita. This next one is definitely still a mystery. It can be found buried beneath the snow above the High Alchemist's arena. It's referred to as the alchemy symbol or dollar symbol. Each of the devs have denied knowing anything about it except for Petri, so this one is attributed to him, just as are the eyes. Petri being the developer who started what would eventually become Noita all the way back in 2007. Yeah, the very first prototype called Bloody Zombies was made almost 20 years ago. Craziness. Nobody knows exactly what this means. It looks like a $sign inside of a capsule with maybe the alchemic symbol for aqua vitae underneath. The entire thing also looks like a down arrow, but what is it pointing at? The arena, the boss itself, or further down, the tech egg? This actually appeared long before any of those were added to the game, way back in early access when the only thing over here was the old version of this biome, the twisty passages. It was then actually removed briefly for a couple updates before eventually being re-added. Interestingly, even though this was added a long time before there was any kind of an arena here, the symbol for aqua vitae, if this is in fact that, might imply we have to do something with whiskey here. Whiskey being the strongest spirit we have in this game, so the closest to ethanol. I've already tried filling these basins with it, and also with Midas, precursor, gold nuggets, gold powder because of the $sign, and there was no reaction. The $sign itself as a symbol could be based on the alchemic symbol of an S on top of a T, which was used as the symbol for the brazen serpent or the rod of Asclepius. It's funny, the caduceus, which is what we use today to represent healing or medicine, actually represents negotiation or commerce. The rod of Asclepius, with one serpent instead of two and no wings on the staff, that is what represents healing. So anyway, because of this, I also tried filling the basins with healthium and lively concoction, and nada. Nothing happens. As expected. As far as we know, there are no triggers here for any kind of material interaction like there are in the regular orb rooms. So consider this an ongoing mystery. While wandering around the Temple of the Art, you may notice 3 distinct statues, each depicting one of 3 different spellcasting masters. The Master of Teleportation, the Master of Blinding, and the Master of Polymorphing. There are obviously a lot of interesting background details around the world of Noita. Even just in the temple itself, there are several more of interest. However, these really do look like they're pieces of a puzzle. Each one is marked with a different glyph superimposed over a different shape, and each holds what we can assume to be an orb at a different position in front of itself. From right to left, these glyphs are P, B, and G, oddly enough. I say that because the one on the right is a polymorph mage, so a letter P above it makes sense. Likewise, the center mage is a blinding mage with the letter B above it. Why is the teleportation mage paired with the letter G? Nobody knows. Also, what do the shapes represent? An egg? A vase? A mountain? Let me float something by you real quick. What if the glyphs aren't meant to correspond to the mages at all, but to the objects? Purple vase? Green egg? Blue or brown something? Yeah, I don't know. But I'm still convinced that this is either a puzzle or just some very important lore masquerading as decoration. Important enough for the Order of Masters to pass it down through the ages in the form of these statues. By the way, I didn't forget, there is actually a 4th statue, but this one is defaced and only the bottom third remains. Why would the Masters of the Temple of the Art deface this statue? Which of the other masters could this represent? Could it potentially represent us, the player character, an abomination? Probably not, but it's still interesting to think about. We do seem to be something else outside of all this, in a completely different faction. We do share the purple robes of the Order of Alchemists. A friend of mine, Gonzo, thinks the broken statue could potentially represent a master of technology, maybe the master of grounding. The other masters could have looked at technology as a perversion of magic and struck this master from their records. Anyway, I do consider this to be something. It does very much look like some sort of puzzle. What do you think, though? For now, I'm filing this one under Open Mysteries. Moving on. Why are innocent creatures attracted to music? This one's a little bit odd. Scorpions, fish, sheep, stags, ducks, and deer act very curiously around the music machines that are scattered around the world. When the machine in the fish pond is actively playing, the fish are attracted to it, swarming very closely around it. The moment the music stops, they immediately disperse. Likewise, the other animals, from those living on the island to the scorpions in the watchtower, all act confused or enamored by the music. This only applies to the innocent, helpless animals of the world. None of the other creatures are affected at all in this way. Why? Why go through the trouble of programming this in? What's the meaning behind it? This is a small one, but it's still an unsolved mystery. We don't know why they behave in this way. It could be nothing. World building. Animals are attracted or confused by music. Sure, okay. Or it could mean something very important, even possibly a hint to a secret. We just don't know. There are ruins that randomly generate across the surface of the desert that may be adorned with several interesting markings. You might say, they're just designs meant to add detail to the game. But in a game like this, almost everything has some purpose and a meaning. Some people in the community have taken these to be hints for the eyes, since one of the markings is a set of 3 ovals, and another seems to show how we read them as down trigram, up trigram, down trigram, etc., with a diamond possibly being a further hint at this rotation. Yet, others believe that these are just lore etched in stone and handed down to us by the earlier civilization of the world. After all, 3 eyes are very important throughout the game, and that's a huge understatement. We see them everywhere, on one of the starting monoliths, on the robe of the Master of Masters, at the Alchemist Sun Quest hints around the world, where they represent taking a vision quest by ingesting copious amounts of fungus. And the main boss itself is Kolmisilma, which means 3-eye. They could also represent the 3 eggs laid by the Midsummer Loon in the game's intro and creation mythology. These 3 eggs eventually hatch to create nature, magic, and technology, the 3 primary forces of the world. We also have the essence chambers, which used to be more diamond-shaped before being given a visual overhaul, so the diamond glyph might represent them, or could just represent something as simple as the spell refresh. Or even going completely the other direction, the alchemic symbol for soap, because why not? No one can say for sure whether these are hints or just lore, but if you do take them as hints for the eyes, they do actually work pretty well. Regardless, more so than some other decorative designs in Noita, these, like the master statues in Temple of the Art, stand out as being important. Since I just mentioned them in the previous section, next up are the tutorial monoliths. They are the subject of much fascination within the community. On the left monolith, between the wasp and the eyes, are glyphs that read rubido. If you're familiar with alchemy, or you can just read Latin, rubido means redness. It's the final stage of the magnum opus, which comprises nigredo, albedo, citrinitas, and rubido. It's the great work of alchemy, symbolizing spiritual awakening and the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The glyphs on the right, beneath the mouse symbol, read eternal life. Why do these glyphs appear here at the beginning of the game? We don't really know for sure, but this is a game about alchemy and the journey towards enlightenment. Everything in this game is themed around gathering knowledge. It's also a roguelike, and the infinite amount of runs we can go on can be seen as alternate lives or even reincarnation. In Hermeticism, the immortal soul passes through a cycle of multiple lives before eventually achieving true knowledge. Thus, rubido and eternal life. As far as I'm concerned, these 2 stones are not the mystery though. These 2 are. Stretching all the way back to before the game was released in early access, these 2 stones have been broken. If they once held information, nobody knows, except for the developers. When the game came out, the devs gave away some keys for it by sharing a GIF on their socials. In that GIF, a long message was written in Noita glyphs on a couple stones in this entrance cave. It said, "Tears in the eye, gazing the sky," and "Receive thy reward," along with a couple encoded Steam keys. Some people think those messages were written on these broken stones, but no, they were actually written on what are now the stones showing the kick and inventory controls. Even if you use a controller, these stones are broken. So this begs the question, because of their position next to these other control input stones, are there any hidden control inputs in the game? Controls with no obvious effect in order to keep them hidden? Some series of buttons or keys or a word we have to enter somewhere? I don't want to spoil too much in case you haven't already played it, but I'll have you know that Environmental Station Alpha, again made by RV, one of the developers of Noita, does have something you need to type in at certain locations. So it's not entirely outside the realm of possibility for Noita to have something similar. But if we reel ourselves in a little bit here and remember that this game has been out for a while and no one has ever found anything like this, and we forget about the idea of hidden controls, we still have two broken monoliths here. Why? And what did they once depict, standing right here amidst these other tutorial stones? Also, what does tears in the eye gazing the sky even mean? Eyes are a very enticing thing in this game, so any mention of an eye is enough to send some of us into a fit. Again, Environmental Station Alpha. Not only does ESA have eyes in it, a lot of eyes, as well as the same exact fish as Noita, but we can also find a secret character, an ancient skull with tears falling from its eye sockets, gazing at the vast darkness of space. In fact, there seem to be a lot of connections between ESA and Noita if we were to look deep enough. Also, I happen to have old versions of Noita from the years before it released in order to help me work on another video I've been working on for a long time. And this is what used to be on the starting stones back in 2017. We can't read these yet. They're entirely different glyphs than what are currently in the game. I am working on that though, and I'll let you know if I do end up translating them. Also, way back in this version of the game, those two stones were already broken. Maybe it's nothing, just environmental storytelling, but it piques my interest nonetheless. When the earthquake spell is cast, it creates this very impressive visual effect. Most people don't really pay attention to it, but if you take the time and you look closer, you'll notice just how complex it is, containing not only runes, but also what appear to be ones and zeros. Beginning from the outermost circle, it says MGICK repeatedly, then just zeros, then 101010 repeatedly, then 11110, 1110, 1110, 1110, then finally MAGICK repeatedly. The innermost symbol is similar to the alchemic symbol for Virgo, though it's not quite exact. This may just be cool looking gibberish, or maybe even some kind of decoding wheel, which is what it looks like to me. What's even more interesting is that the ones and zeros in this design perfectly match the number of holy mountain portals in a new game world. Yeah. So, throughout the years, there have of course been attempts to fill the eyes underneath these portals with an assortment of different materials, in hopes that that will influence the destination of one of them, because if you didn't know, the teleportation fluid inside these eyes is what powers each of the portals. Remove this liquid and the portals themselves vanish. So the idea being that we have to maybe solve a cipher using this wheel that will tell us a certain material or materials to then fill certain eyes with in order to potentially reach some other location. Unfortunately, none of us have been able to successfully open a portal to some other dimension quite yet, but maybe the secret lies inside this circle. I've talked about this one several times in the past, but it also remains entirely unsolved. A long time ago, a member of the community named Calioresis was poking around inside a part of the executable called the 34 Orb End Credits. In this large blob of code, they discovered two things. The phrase Kitaxia Caloista, which translates to thanks for the fish, obviously a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference.
So long. And thanks for all the fish.
And this QR code, which is curiously overlapped with a bunch of noise. Scanning it opens this link, which I'm not going to spoil for you in this video. It's good though. Anyway, yeah, that's literally what it shows. Initially, the noise was found to be a copy of the exact same QR code, but that turned out to be wrong. This noise, though, does have some peculiarities. Patterns that don't occur randomly in any known noise generator. Rows that match other rows when looking at specific color channels. What this means, you guessed it, nobody knows. Not yet. The QR code itself is actually loaded into the game's memory if you obtain the 34th orb, where it remains for the rest of your run. However, when it's loaded, the very first pixel is inexplicably changed to white. Nobody knows why. Furthermore, if you end that run and start a new one, the QR remains loaded as long as the game doesn't restart. This kickstarted a bunch of theories about doing some sort of challenge run after acquiring 34 orbs, something like reaching the Cauldron or acquiring a certain amount of orbs again. But so far, no one has found any way to trigger either of these to appear in-game, if in fact they do at all. The 34 orb end credits never appears. Thanks for the fish? This led people to believe that all of this exists purely to troll data miners. Nevertheless, that leaves us with the burning question. Why is the QR code loaded into memory but with one single pixel changed? Does this somehow trigger something else to happen in the game somewhere? I mean, there is nearly invisible writing on the background for the cessation cipher. The entire structure of the Cauldron room is generated by the engine on the fly. This single pixel of the QR could potentially be causing the engine to generate some change in the world somewhere that we just haven't noticed yet. That change, no matter how small, could be very important. That brings me at last to our final mystery. There are several enigmatic microbiomes that appear in the game, 2 of which are actually named with appropriate title cards when entered. All of these biomes have one thing in common. Nobody knows why they exist. Obviously, the 2 gold biomes come with a gameplay function. They're filled with enough money for you to buy pretty much anything you need for the remainder of any normal run. Sure. But that doesn't really explain why these 2 giant squares of gold exist, or why they have actual biome title card pop-ups when entered. Although, like I said, they do have a very significant effect on gameplay, so that's usually written off as whatever, who cares, money. But something about them still really irks me. Even more mysterious is the water biome. It's a single chunk of water at the bottom right corner of the cursed rock surrounding the tower. Why is this here? It was actually here in the middle of the rock long before the tower ever existed. Why? I distinctly remember finding it during my first big exploration run. Singular, almost mystical. What purpose does a chunk of water have? And again, it's officially titled, recognized by the game as a distinct biome. It's just really odd. Of course, in New Game Plus, these become a lot more common, but I think that's just an artifact of how New Game Plus generates worlds, similar to Nightmare Mode. There are just a lot of interesting inconsistencies in New Game Plus worlds, but I think that might be a topic for another video. In addition to the water and the gold biomes, there is the mystery of the Hills 2 biome. Where is the Hills 2 biome, you ask? Why, right here. In this empty space between the EDR on the eastern side of the world. Where are all the hills?
Imagination.
I guess they're invisible. Or, and this is going to sound crazy, maybe there's some obtuse way to generate a biome in here. How? I don't know, maybe by loading a QR code and then doing some crazy stuff afterwards? Your guess is as good as mine. There is some interesting code associated with this biome. In the data, there is a folder named Caves. Inside this folder, there are a series of 6 different cave structures in the shape of the eyes. The code to generate these eye caves is present in both and only the Hills and Hills 2 biomes. However, they don't seem to ever actually generate. At least nobody I know of has ever reported seeing large eye-shaped structures either up here or in the starting valley, because that's the Hills biome. Unfortunately, this could just be bugged. That's a very real possibility. There are definitely some other bugs in the game. Or maybe doing something after a 34 orb run does generate them, or there's some other convoluted series of actions we need to take to get them to generate. Despite the extent to which the game has been data mined and decompiled, there's still a lot the community does not know. This game is very complex, with a lot of complex systems, and the devs definitely do have a history of obfuscating certain things. Maybe all of this, the eyes, the cauldron, the alchemy symbol, the master statues, the desert ruins, the earthquake circle, the 34 orb credits, and the mystery of Hills 2, maybe it's all tied together into one giant secret. Or maybe not. Regardless, there are still a lot of mysteries to explore in the world of Noita. As always, I want to thank you very much for watching. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters and channel members for all your support. This past year has been one of the most difficult of my entire life, so I really appreciate all of you for sticking it out and supporting the channel. That said, things should be settling down again soon, so I'll finally be able to start getting videos out a little bit faster. Trust me, I have a lot of them in the works. There are videos from 2 years ago that I still don't have out, and I will be getting those out. Anyway, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to help me get to 200,000 subscribers at last, please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Have a great day, and happy noiting. And what about that dang down arrow made of lava?